I hate that voice. And we'll be putting the video and indeed Scott's report on EcoStreets up on our website. I'm going to try and collate up, there's a number of superb videos from the 3.5 years of EcoStreets, and I'll try and get them all in one place on our website. But anyway, so Scott has Scott has many distinctions, but one of them is being his ACAN's only paid member of staff, working as a self-employed consultant for us and more recently for PCAN as well. In fact, I think we can take the credit for introducing you to PCAN.
Indeed, you can, yes.
Yeah. And supported by several grants, and there are people on this call who have very, very generously supported this work over the years. But although the various strands of work do continue, as Scott will no doubt outline at the end, the main grant for EcoStreets is now fully spent. So we thought it was timely to have a stock take after 3.5 years of work. It was actually Finna up there and I who appointed Scott in March 2022, so 3.5 years ago, having interviewed half a dozen candidates, actually. And I think it was one of the best decisions we have ever made, definitely, because he's a multi-talented person, as most of you know. As for EcoStreets, I was looking back in my files earlier and I wrote back in 2021 that the main purpose, and this remains true, was to reach out into the community and engage more people in taking action. This was in capitals in the paper I wrote at the time, taking action on the climate and improving biodiversity, and in particular to burst our bubble, because even then we found we were basically talking at all our events to the same interested, committed people. So one of the tests of EcoStreet's success, I think, is whether we were able to burst that bubble. EcoStreets was piloted in White Down Ward, Ginny, with you, very strongly in support, and then focused on some of the new housing estates. Reaching out to the new housing estates was very, very important part of the project, and then more recently the town generally. So in this next three quarters of an hour, 50 minutes, we're going to celebrate EcoStreet's achievements, which are many, and its legacy, and also reflect on what we have learned. So Scott is going to give us a presentation for somewhere around half an hour to 40 minutes, he thinks.
Yeah,
and then
something
we'll
like
have
that.
questions at the end, and we'll finish about 8 o'clock. So over to you, Scott. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that lovely intro. I shall share my presentation. I hope everyone can see that.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, so yes, one of the key aspects of EcoStreets was also that we wanted it to be a project that came from the bottom up, which means that we started out trying to find out what the communities really wanted from us, which was one of the things where we thought, well, since we want to talk to new people, not to the usual suspects of ACAN's reach, we need to know what these people want from us. That was very hard to do. It turned out to be, that was one of the biggest challenges, to really tap into the community and find out what they actually want. We did find out some things, and then we offered things they wanted, and then they didn't want them after all. So I'm going to talk about that in a little while. So what we did, the purpose was that it was going to inform future projects. That's why we had that two-tiered organization with a pilot project first and then the 2-year project after that. One of the things I can already say, what we found consistently, what people really do want, is nature connection. That was the one thing that kept coming through. The purpose was also to reach out and to educate, to build community, which was very difficult. And yes, to address the frustration of ACAN's limited reach despite its many projects, as Jenny was saying, and of course to affect behavior change in the people. That was really the big underlying goal, because if we want to make communities more climate resilient, it means that we have to affect behavior change. Um, we had a concept that was very much focused around positivity. So everyone's always talking about the negative footprint that we all have on the planet, which is a concept that kind of makes us feel bad about ourselves, but we kind of try to focus a lot, especially in the work with children, but also when I was talking to adults, about the positive effects that we can have on the world. So it's the positive handprint concept. If you've not heard of that concept, I strongly suggest you Google it, because it's very, very uplifting, because it's all about what we can actually do. So if you're talking about sort of galvanizing community action, it's really all about, of course, it's about making our footprint smaller, but it's about making our handprint bigger, our positive handprint bigger. And I think we managed to do this with some of the things we did with EcoStreets. This is something I use a lot when I work with children in primary schools. I developed this monster, which has the tiny feet because it has a tiny footprint, and it has the huge hands because it has a huge handprint. So this is what we're kind of all going to aim for. And it's a nice picture to bear in mind if we're talking about community action, because this is really the type of person we want to create. Fluffy and with small feet and huge hands. This is a picture that one of the year 5 students drew after a workshop that I did in one of the primary schools. So he had the monster with the big hands and the small feet. That was the thing that I had introduced. Helpful Bob, he called it. Then he drew his nemesis, Evil Bob, who, as you will notice, has no hands at all and really huge feet, so he's got the huge footprint. And then, interestingly, he added, and Evil Bob is saying, buy a new phone, and Helpful Bob is saying, don't buy a new phone. And then you have I Don't Know Bob, who is unsure if he's supposed to buy a new phone or not. And he's got the green eye and the red eye. So he's got the capacity to make either a good or a bad decision. And I thought that was a wonderful, and there was no prompt for this child to draw a monster like that. That really came out of that child. And I thought it was wonderful, because we are all the I Don't Know Bobs. We all have the capacity to either make good or bad decisions, and we need input, good input from Helpful Bob to make the good decisions. So, and I think this is really what community work is all about. We have a bunch of I Don't Know Bobs, and we're trying to get them to make the right decision, to go in the right direction. So just as we're on that topic of behavior change, I just thought I'd give a really quick glimpse into these 6 stages of behavior change, because that is relevant to the project. I'm going to see if I can make this thing here smaller. Don't know, I can make that smaller. Well, so we've got a stage where we're starting out with the pre-contemplation stage, which is where people feel they have no control about things, like, for example, a topic like climate change. They feel they can't have any effect, so they're not in control. They're resigned to whatever the state it is that they are in, and often they're also underinformed. So that's where our first point with education would come in. We say we're giving people who are in that stage the information that makes them realize that they have actually some control. They have some level of control of their own actions, and they can actually get out of this resignation and then actually change something so that they can be a more positive and have a more positive impact. Then they would go into the contemplation stage, which is ambivalent. So they would kind of see the possible changes, but very often they would view them as a process of having to give up something rather than a means of gaining something. So this would be like giving up your SUV. Or giving up meat, or giving up. So it's very much a focus on, I have to give up something that I currently enjoy, rather than being focused on what I'm gaining from that. So again, this is where a community project like ours would come in to assist people in realizing what the gains actually are of the behavior change. Then you would enter the planning stage, where people are actually getting all of the information that they need to make these behavioral changes. So again, this would be where a group like ACAN's many groups would be the facilitators to give that information and the opportunity for change, and then lead them into the action stage where there's actually steps taken to make these changes, like, for example, use the car less, get an electric car, look at getting a heat pump at home, switching to more plant-based diet, these kind of things. And then our next job would be to reward people for that and to help them consolidate and maintain that behavior change and build resilience, because there's always going to be the relapse stage, which is a natural stage in behavior change, like when someone tries to quit smoking or drinking, and then sometimes they're going to have a relapse when they're under stress, and they will be disappointed. And if then they don't have community, they will easily slip back into the resignation bit of it. So that's where community building comes in. If we want to be resilient communities, then we need to lift up people so that we can support them through the relapse stage. So I think on all 5 stages of this, we really have points where a community project like EcoStreets, or all of the groups that are under the ACAN umbrella, can really touch people and help affect that behavior change. Looking at our EcoStreets project, and then where we try to find ways, leverage points for this kind of change, we had a timeline that allowed us to really, and we were very lucky there with our funding, I think, as well, that we in the end had 3 years to really develop this project and look at points where we could leverage what we were doing in an effective way within the community. So we had our pilot phase. So step 1 was our pilot phase, where we launched the project in the White Down neighborhood, where we had the first pilot projects of community events and the guided walks, the creative things like the poetry walks. We could trial all these things. We did a baseline survey. We collected feedback. So we got the feedback from the community. We could see what worked and what didn't work. Then we had, as a step 2, a phase where we were analyzing all of this and could refine the strategy. And then we had the 2-year follow-up phase where we expanded the activities. We covered a larger area with the different new housing estates. And we were sort of deepening our foothold in the community. And now we're at the point where we have our final evaluation and we're going the next steps. And like Jenny was saying, we're lucky enough to have some funding to continue some of the most successful things that we did, which are the guided ecology walks and the creative workshops. So luckily, the legacy of EcoStreets continues, and we're still active in the community. Looking at the guiding principles that underpinned this project, I kind of boiled them down to 5 principles. One was really important: accessibility, open to all. All the events were always free. That was really important to us. We didn't want there to be a paywall, basically a barrier for anyone to join up. All the events were local. You never needed to be able to drive anywhere or anything like that. You could literally walk out of your front door and then participate in an event, and open to all ages, backgrounds, and levels of climate change knowledge. So we never assumed any kind of level of previous knowledge or interest. It was really, accessible really to all. Second principle was creativity and emotion, where we try to use creative methods like poetry or music to create a more emotive connection to nature. And of course, because I am also an artist, this was a part that was really close to my heart. And even though, and I'll come to that in a bit, even though these creative workshops that we did were not the ones that had the most footfall, I think the feedback we got from them was among the most powerful. So we could really see that the people who did participate in those creative endeavors really felt that this was a transformative experience. The third principle was place-based. So we start where we are. We focus on local nature, local wildlife, neighborhood action to make this huge topic of climate change more tangible for people and kind of related to their everyday life. Example, if I take people out into ACAN woods on an ecology walk, and then I can talk about how climate change will affect these beach woods because of the way that beaches react to droughts, then that is a way how I can take the big topic of climate change right into like the woods that they have at their front door and how that might affect them, which just kind of makes it more real to people. Empowerment through participation would be the fourth one, where we invited people to give us ideas of what they wanted us to do, work together with other organizations, like for example when we had Hampshire Swifts come in and put up the Swift boxes and do the Swift talk. So we were trying to keep it really open. Or we had a local guy who we got to know through EcoStreets, who's a real hedgehog fan, and then he did a hedgehog talk. And we invite people in to be active participants rather than us just offering a program and then people just only ever being the recipients of that. And sustainability and legacy, that nice phrase, planting seeds that last. I guess the Ball Road wildflower verge would be the symbol of that, looking a bit more rugged this year than it did in the beginning, but still we've planted some seeds there that will definitely last. And design resources that leave a lasting value. So Swift boxes, bat boxes, the bench that we put into Hopfield's estate, being very, very being used a lot. So these are things that we kind of left behind from this project that have a lasting impact also just on the physical environment of people. Hopefully we'll also leave a bit of a lasting impact on people's minds as well. So to just recap what we did, we started with a baseline resident survey. We did a survey at the Butts Primary School as well to see what children thought about climate change. We had our big opening fair on the Butts to have a bit of awareness about the project as it was kicking off. We had several workshops and different walks. We came up with different ways of trying to coax people out, be it now dog walkers, being the poetry walk. We had the Cuppa for the Climate, which was an indoors thing where we tried to establish a regular group where people could come and talk about different issues around climate change. We had the Listen to the Children exhibition and photo book, which came out of the primary school survey. We had the Web of Life musical play and the choir piece, which was performed with students from the Butts School and which students of St. Lawrence's School sang and is now on YouTube. So that was the music part of it, working with children. We had the Wildflower Verge. We did the monthly leafletting in the ward. And then we did another survey at the end of the project. So it was it was a huge program that we stuffed into these 11 months there. And I think we garnered a lot of insight from that. Our first survey that we did, interestingly, and you will remember some of these results, we straight away could see that people were very aware of the climate crisis, but the key finding really was that emotionally people weren't really affected by it. The adults, at least, weren't really affected by it. They knew it was there, they knew it was going to affect them or their families personally, but their emotional concern about it was quite low, whereas with the children it was the opposite. Their emotional concern was quite high, which was one of the reasons that triggered us to do the Listen to the Children exhibition. And it also showed us that working together with schools is key, because if we want to build climate change resilience, we have to pick these children up who feel that eco-anxiety, and we have to give them the possibility to be resilient in the face of a changing climate, and empower them to really deal with a changing world. And that is something that now I'm doing a lot with my colleague Emma, with young ACAN. So we took this strand and that fed very nicely into the work that Emma was already building up with young ACAN. So part of the EcoStreets findings are also now flowing into our work with young ACAN, which is a great example of really why ACAN is such a great organization, because we've got so many different things and we're all interchanging knowledge and helping each other. We saw also, because of that problem that people are aware of the facts, but somehow they're emotionally disconnected, we thought that creativity and really including the arts in climate outreach could be a vital thing in order to increase emotional involvement. When we did our second survey, this is now for the second phase of the project, where we went to the ACAN Hill estate across from the sports center. We've got the same results, mirrored the previous survey. And what we did with this survey is that we actually asked people, so what are your top priorities? What would you like from us? What should we talk to you about? What should we give you input on? And they said wildlife-friendly gardening, energy consumption, litter, and growing your own food. That was the priorities that they had, relating to the top 3 worries that they had voiced in that survey, which was which was biodiversity loss, pollution. Interestingly, a lot of issues that we kind of thought were key issues, like, for example, plant-based diet or reduced consumption, so 2 things that are actually among the most powerful things you can do for the planet, ranked quite low in people's minds. So that, again, that showed us that there is a lack of understanding of the big picture still, where more education is still necessary. Even if people know that climate change is happening, they are still apparently not aware enough of the big picture. They see some of the issues, but not all of them. But anyway, we saw what we wanted to give people, what people wanted. So what we did was that we, building on that survey, we did a flyer campaign where we gave them ways to address exactly these top 4 issues that they had wanted to address. So this was the flyer that went to all households, and it led them to the different groups within ACAN that could help with these issues. So that was one of the ideas we had, was, well, if we have enough groups within ACAN that we can direct people to these groups if they want that kind of input. So hopefully, and that was nothing we could monitor, maybe some people actually got in touch with some of these groups. There was no way we can know, but we do know from our surveys that these leaflets generally, there was about a 25% of people, so a quarter of the households, who did report that they would regularly read the leaflets and that they would also follow suggestions on the leaflets. So fingers crossed that maybe we got some people into ACAN there. This kind of touches on one of the challenges that we had, which was around monitoring results, because even though we tried to have good practices in getting feedback, like, for example, after the walks, we would have these little feedback slips so people could say what if they liked the walk and if they would like to attend another one, and if they had attended an EcoStreets walk before. So we tried to get that kind of hard data. But in a lot of cases, like with this, it was very hard for us to actually determine the level of success of the project, because a lot of it is not really measurable. We don't have the hard numbers in a lot of the cases. That is very different with children, because we always know how many children are in a school class, so we always know how many children we've reached, and that's a lot of children. And what we learned from them is that we really need to be aware of just how worried children are about the climate crisis. I don't know if some of you might have seen the book, Listen to the Children. It's still available at Goldfinch. I think there's always a couple of copies at Goldfinch. Thank you, Jenny. Yes. So I'm going to try if this works. I should have tried this earlier probably, but just to give you an idea, I'm hoping you can still see my screen. So the way that we did this, yes, is that we have quotes that all come from that survey we did with the primary school. And then we always have a little text underneath each quote that relates to it. So here, for example, we have...
It's a white screen at the moment, Scott.
okay, so it doesn't actually show the picture.
Nah,
That
sorry.
that's a shame. Okay, well, I shall...
Because it is a shame,
um,
because it's such a powerful piece of work
yes.
to the children.
Well, I strongly suggest if you don't have a copy, there's always some at the Goldfinch. They're
Yeah,
free to pick up.
absolutely.
Let's see. Okay, now am I back to the
You
normal
are,
screen
yeah.
now? Okay, great. So that was one, I think, of the big successes of the project overall was the Listen to the Children exhibition. It was a traveling exhibition. We exhibited it in Alton as well as in Petersfield, and we had a lot of really, really good feedback around it. And we really, with this idea of having to really lift children up and empower them, again, something that we do with Young ACAN a lot now, was also the idea behind the Web of Life play and song, which is all about taking positive action, having the big handprint, the big positive handprint. So yeah, that definitely in my mind is one of the huge successes that we take away from this project. In the second phase, what we did was we focused on the new estates. So we focused mainly on 4 of them: Hopfield, up on above Wilhowell Meadow, Acander Hill across from the sports centre, then Rivermead Gardens, that's the Carla estate in the side of the old brewery, and Gilbert White Way. A big key point here were again our guided nature walks, because people had enjoyed those so much, and it was always the idea that you could pick people up at these estates and then walk into nature with them. And we found that a surprising number of residents would had not done that before. Even people living in the Acander Hill estate, which is literally basically in Acander Woods, had not been in the woods. Because they were just uncertain about the paths, and quite often people would say, "Oh, I'm afraid to get lost when I go by myself. I just don't feel confident going there alone." So it was really like a door opener. And we've had people who then afterwards were like, "Oh, that's great. Now I know now I know it a bit. I'm going to take my family here. I'm going to take my daughters here." So that was definitely effective. We continued with the leafletting. The leaflets normally were, one side was offers of walks and what was on that month, and then on the back of them we often had practical tips that kind of fit the season, be it about using your pumpkins around Halloween, or sustainable Christmas, or planting plants for pollinators. So there was always something that people could action if they so wished. We continued with our social media presence. We continued with the Wildflower Verge, and we supplied free bed boxes, free Swift boxes, and a bench to Hopfield's estate. Just in an attempt to really inspire stewardship in people, we thought something like a Swift box or a bat box is just such a nice physical thing that people can do something in their garden for nature. They can improve a habitat, and they get the sense of, I can actually do something. Like, my garden is important. What I can do is important. So I think that was a really powerful thing. That was also one of the things that got a lot of traction. When I was delivering the bed boxes, I could, for example, see that quite a lot of people had signed up for one, seeing as it was free. That were, say, if you kind of look at it from a class perspective, that were quite like in a demographic that you would probably normally say would not be ACAN's typical sort of middle class demographic. So that was nice to see that, as soon as you remove that paywall barrier, there were a lot of people who were like, oh yeah, we would actually love to put up a bed box. If it's free, then we're going to get it. So that was really powerful, I think. Those nature walks were really the one thing that activated the adults. It was the workshops we offered, we struggled a lot more with. We tried to offer workshops around the topic of climate change and the bigger picture and everything. And we managed. We would have had more funding for them, but unfortunately there was so little uptake that we only could do, I think, half of them that we of what we would have had funding for. So that was a bit disheartening to see that even if you make those super accessible and free and everything, with a project that's already sort of established and quite a big promotional push with flyers and social media and everything, that still it was almost impossible to drum up interest for it. So that kind of shows how, again, it shows though how powerful this nature connection thing is, because if you can't get people to do the more the more climate change centered stuff, then you just need to get them from a different angle. And like I said earlier, with the example with the climate change and the local beach woods, I would always talk about climate change on these walks. So hopefully it was part of forming a bit of a picture for these people. So some of the conclusions would be that, yes, leafletting was really important. When we did ask about it, interestingly, only about 10% of respondents of the survey were aware of our social media, and almost 50% were aware of the leafletting. So that remains powerful. It's a time and effort thing. So when it comes to funding, of course, it just takes quite a while to walk around and put a leaflet in all of the letterbox. So it's sort of volunteer power / funding for paid hours of doing that. But it is worth it. Visible actions like the Fair on the Buds or the Wildflower Verge or the Swift boxes are definitely good at getting people's attention. There was a big willingness amongst people to engage, in the sense of that we didn't get any negative pushback ever. People were happy to do the survey. People were always expressing that they think it's great what we're doing, but that doesn't necessarily translate in like a very elevated uptake or activism on the side of the people. So just because they're on our side doesn't necessarily mean they're also going to actively do something. But like I said earlier, almost a quarter of people reported that the leaflets inspired them to take some kind of action, which is great. Yes, I think also important is that sometimes the successes are quite small. Like, for example, that we got this one guy, the hedgehog champion, Mark. It's just one guy, but then he held that talk, and he imparted his knowledge to a whole room full of people. He also ended up working with the Butts Primary School through this, with one of their eco champions, one of the kids who was an eco champion and who was particularly interested in hedgehogs, and I think he came in and did something with the children. So even a small success like getting one person on board can then translate into a bigger success. So that was definitely a learning outcome, to not look down on small successes, because it can, within one community, every single member of that community can have quite a big impact. Our learning outcomes were definitely that it is very important to keep your approaches to climate communication creative. That it's a great thing if you can do visible improvements to local natural places, because when the Wildflower Verge was in its full glory, and its first, and to a degree also in its second year, people would mention it all the time. They would take photos of it. It would be something that really attracted quite a lot of attention, and the residents really loved it. That, again, it didn't translate in the residents being super active in its upkeep, but they definitely were aware of it. Yes, the power of nature topics, local wildlife, can definitely be used as an entry point to that broader climate discourse. I call them gateway activities, it's like a gateway into the discussion. And also the need of us as a charity to be consistent in inspiring people to make the right behavioral choices. And my favorite example for that is always that if we are always talking about transitioning to a more plant-based diet, if we have some kind of event where there's tea and coffee, that we just only have plant-based milk, that we don't offer dairy, because why would we if we're talking about going plant-based? And if there are people who don't want plant-based milk, well, they can have black tea or coffee. I have to drink black tea or coffee all the time when I'm in places where there's only dairy, and I've not died of that yet, and they can all go home and have their dairy milk coffee afterwards. So but this is just one example, I think, of where we really need to be on our toes and think about these behavior changes that we want to affect and how we can help people make these correct decisions so that the I don't know Bob turns into the green-eyed Bob, making the right decisions, and that we are part of normalizing that kind of change that we want to see. So leading by example, definitely powerful, because people are looking for people to lead. I think that's another thing that came out in the surveys. People are kind of willing to make changes, but they're waiting for people to lead them along the way. That's just some examples of some of the flyers we had. So we tried to, we then, in the second half of the project, we had developed this quite clear branding, so that every time a flyer would come through the door, people would know, that's EcoStreets again, I've seen this type of flyer before, to just establish a continuous presence in people's heads. Now, unfortunately, we've not had the possibility to continue with these flyers the entire time, so that's a bit of a pity, because ideally you would really do it monthly, but it's a huge effort to do that, and it comes at huge costs, and so we just weren't able to keep that up all the time. But it's definitely, looking into the future, something that should be looked at as a way of establishing continuous presence. And yes, some pictures of some of the different things that we did, and you can see really getting people out into nature was one of the things I was really passionate about, because once they're out there and they realize what's here, what there is, what there theoretically also is to lose, they will be keen to protect it, hopefully. On the lower left corner is our exhibition at St. Lawrence's Church, another nice example of community cooperation we had with them. Up there you see the children in St. Lawrence's Primary School that sang the Web of Life song. So just gives a bit of an idea of all the many activities that we have done over the course of the year.
Mention the climate mosaic up there before you.
Oh yes, that's behind my. I can't actually see
it.
Yes, the climate mosaic in the upper right-hand corner. One of the ones that we did, because it's a very, very powerful interactive workshop, and that's one of my big regrets that we couldn't do more of those, because the ones that we did were very, very powerful, and I will not give up on that. I will keep pushing for that. But yeah, so definitely, bottom line, I think after those 3 years, I would say it was a big success. We've learned a lot of things about the local community. We have, I think, touched a lot of people. We've touched a lot of children, definitely, which is great, and hopefully some of the parents through them as well. We've opened up local green spaces to a lot of residents who before that hadn't had any access to them. And I think we've made an impact on the Alton community, and hopefully through continuing with the creative workshops and with the guided walks also into the next year, we'll be able to keep some of that momentum and keep engaging these people. We've got quite a lot of people who keep returning, but also with almost every single walk, there are new people who've not been before. So that's a really great sign. And with these walks, it varies wildly, just in case you're wondering how many people you normally get on these walks. It really varies between 3 and I think the biggest one was 21, was one of the Riverway walks. So it can be anything. And because people don't have to sign up beforehand, you never know. But my approach was always that even if it's only 2 or 3, I am going to do the walk, because these people might tell their friends and then they might come next time. So if it's not, I think if 1 or 2 walks where it was pouring down with rain and only one person showed up, were like walks where we said, well, let's not do it today. But apart from that, I think that's an important learning outcome, that even if very few people actually take up the offer, it's really important to still go through with the offer, so that there's a certain trust in it that it's going to go down, and then these people can get more people in the next time. Yeah, so that's it for my presentation, and very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Bravo, well done. It reflects the most phenomenal amount of work by reflecting on what you described there. Absolutely fantastic. And there's some real jewels of achievement in there, I think. Things like Listen to the Children, the Web of Life, the work with schools, the connecting people with nature are really profound, very deep, actually, and will live with those who have experienced them for a very, very long time, I think. So, comments, questions, Jenny?
My screen's gone blank, so I'm not quite sure why I can't see anything, but I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We hear you and see you.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm just incredibly impressed with the amount of work that you've covered during this project. I just think it's amazing, actually, Scott, and I think you should be very proud of yourself in what you've achieved during that time. And I think our community actually have been very, very lucky that you've had such an amazing variety of walks and workshops and all the things that you've done during that period on offer to them. And I just think, and I'm really, really encouraged, that actually 25% of people actually it has created some change in their own lifestyles. I think that's amazing, quite frankly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ginny. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Sarah, you got your hand up? Is that what's close?
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, I think Ginny said it all really, but a massive congratulations. I think
Thank you.
An amazing amount of work there. And it is, I think, especially working at the national park, we recognise people's connection to nature is really strong. Getting them to take action on climate is a real challenge. But what you've done is you've started them on that awareness journey. So they probably already understood that they appreciated and loved nature, but you've made that emotional connection for them. And it is really hard sometimes to demonstrate what impact that might have down the line. And that for some people might be a month down the line, and for some people might be a few months or a year down the line. But people will take away things from your workshops that will be the first seed, like you say, planting those seeds to them taking action. And as they hear and read more about climate change, the seeds that you've sown will make their ears prick up and make them take notice of other things that are going on.
Exactly. That's also always what I hope, that it will just put things into perspective, and then they will remember some of the things that like they hear about a drought and it's like, I heard about how the droughts are going to affect the local woods, and then make all these little connections in their minds.
Yeah, no, well done, and congratulations as well for keeping that profile going. I think, as you said, is really key as well. Well done.
And with such high quality communications materials, actually, I ought to just flag that, because Scott gave you just some examples there, but there are many others, and they're all absolutely superb. And really, I hope they can be reused, repurposed in the future rather than lost. Actually, it's something I've been thinking about. Other comments from colleagues?
Emily?
Emily?
Yeah, I was just going to echo thoughts as well. I thought it was absolutely fantastic initiative, and it's really great to see all the schools involved as well. And I think that's something that ACAN, I know you, Scott, and Emma as well, do really well, is getting all the school children involved as well. I don't know if you're going to move on to this, but what's the future of EcoStreets?
Yeah, it's a bit up in the air. So at the minute, there is still funding for more walks and creative workshops. That is going on into the new year as well. So there will be one more walk this year, on I think the 13th of December in the South Downs National Park in Chorlton. And then as part of the South Downs National Park Gateway project. And then there's a whole bunch of creative workshops which we're teaming up with the Freedom for Expression Gallery with. So there's one this year, still on the 6th actually, a songwriting workshop, which I hope I'm still going to get some more signups for. And then there's a whole bunch in the first half of the next year. So that's all secured. That will definitely go on. And then I'm doing a lot of work now. I'm focusing a lot of my work with young ACAN as well. So the work with schools will definitely go on. That's clear, and that's also one of the one focus of ACAN in general is young ACAN and working with the children. And I guess at the moment there's no. I don't think, Jenny, there's anything on the horizon that would fund another long-term project like that. Which is it's a shame, because it's all the things like the leafletting and just really having the capacity to do these things month after month after month with a certain regularity. I think that's just something that is very powerful within a community. But of course, for that you need a bit more funding, and core funding and security to plan ahead. So I think that's why I said we were very lucky to get these 3 years funded, because it really enabled us to do a lot. And now it'll just be a question of how can we kind of doggy paddle to stay afloat, and maybe until the next bigger funding comes along where we can.
We're continuously applying for grants. The 2 strands that Scott mentioned are funded by the District Council Community Climate Action Fund. That's the Nature Connect work programme, and then a grant from the South Downs National Park for the Gateway project, linking people at that end of town in Chorlton, and persuading them they don't need to get in their cars to go there, but that's another story.
God, yes. Chorlton is very, very far
away. Long way,
Yes, it's a very long way in people's heads.
So we've got those strands of funding. As Scott says, there are increasingly, well, there have been over the last year, close bridges between young ACAN and EcoStreets. So we've just in the process of, I've just literally applied for a grant on Scott's behalf for primary school assemblies, for example, to do an assembly in each and every dozen primary schools in the Alton cluster. But of course, it's now very fragmented, and we're having to just sort of stitch the mosaic together. I hope we'll still keep that EcoStreets brand, because I think the brand is very powerful and stands for all that learning that Scott has outlined. But, we haven't got the equivalent of the community infrastructure levy that funded the work out on the new estates under the heading of social infrastructure. And we were unsuccessful second time round with that. So, and that's what actually was the bedrock, I think it's fair to say, of the EcoStreets project. None of this would have been achieved without it. So,
Can I just ask Scott? You've done this amazing project for 3.5 years and got an enormous amount of experience in a way which is really very pioneering. To what extent have you been able to summarize your experience and disseminate it more widely to other areas that might be trying to do the same thing? Could not just things which have worked, but also things that haven't worked. Because we've got to be realistic about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's actually something that I think Jenny, we had discussed at one of our one-on-one meetings, how we can disseminate that knowledge. I've done one really interesting one with actually South Downs National Park again, where I did the educators, the sustainable educators thing, where I talked to some other educators, which was great. But I haven't really been able yet to do that in a very sort of institutionalized form, that I would go out and really share these these lessons learned and the experiences that I've made. And I would love to do that. I would love to find a way to share that with other organizations. And I think that's something we should focus on. That could be a grant application.
I mean,
We can.
you could write a paper for somebody or a more popular article to.
That's true. Yes, I've written a project report, which is a long read, and probably only very interested people would read through all the 20 pages of it. But that will be on the ACAN website, so that will be out there to read a full project report. But yes, writing an article out of that would be a good thing, or doing. We could do sort of a very concise little series of presentations, for example, that, like 10-minute snippets that people could easily access, or something. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that. So Jenny's making a note of it already.
Of course. No, it's a very good point. We've tried to share it with PCAN and with WINAC as well. You went to a meeting, didn't you, with WINAC, who've got a sort of vaguely overlapping type of project underway. WeCan, they call it, don't they? In their community. But yeah, I was just thinking, actually, we ought to perhaps talk to the Transition Network, because they're national. Yeah, and I've got lots of networks. We had a grant from them, didn't we, which fed into some of this. So that's one possibility. Yeah, there's a lack of sort of national infrastructure to share all of this stuff, really. Actually,
that's true.
Infrastructure, isn't there?
That's true. Yeah, Sarah.
I will put you in touch with Jeff from our comms team, and let's see if we can do some comms around it and a little case study or something that then might get some interest.
That'd be a case study. Would be great. Yeah.
And at some point in the next year, I am hoping to hold some sort of. I'm hesitating because we've got a lot going on, but I'm hoping at some point I will be holding a conference or some event to bring climate action groups together. And I just want to do it in an interactive way rather than lots of presentations. But anyway, I'm mulling it over. What do I actually want to do? But it would be great to share your experience.
Definitely.
With other groups as well.
Very, very keen to do that. Yes.
Yeah.
But I also was really interested in the idea of the bench. And I know it's difficult if you're not sat on the bench all the time to know what people's thoughts are around it. But I'd love to know if you've had any hearsay and heard people commenting on, do people notice the plaque? And I think that's a great idea because it's really not in their face, but it might make people think.
It is actually interesting. I was thinking along the same lines because it's quite close to where I live, and we go walk there quite often, and I sometimes see people sit there, and I think I should really go up to these people and say, like, coincidentally, as you're sitting here right now, have you noticed the plaque? Because that's one of the things. It's so hard to quantify. You just don't know. People definitely like the bench because there's a playground and people can now sit down while their children are playing. Originally, the idea was also because I used that playground before the bench existed to do some of these some outdoor talks on local wildlife, and the idea was that in the future we could maybe use the bench as the central point of these talks, and then people would be aware of it afterwards. So that would be something to pick up when we've got some funding for some more of these talks. That would be nice. But yeah, originally we had also wanted to paint the bench green and make it a bit more obvious that it's like a green thing, but that all then didn't materialize. So we kind of settled for the plaque, which it's an interesting question. See if I can get some more information.
It's a nice idea. I think I know schools, they have friendship benches, don't they, so that children can go and sit there if they feel lonely and someone else might come and chat to them. And I'm just wondering with the plaque there, whether that encourages
people. Council had friendship benches for quite a
while.
And I know in the eastern end of the park, we had a creative project where we had sort of listening to people talking about the history of the national park, and you'd sit on a bench and there'd be a little code where you could and then you'd hear the stories. And I'm just wondering if we could find some funding to do something similar about climate change, so people are sitting there to rest, but they actually might interact with something that gives them a bit more information.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the disadvantages or handicaps of our limited funding for this is the inability to go back into estates. So we moved from one state to the next estate, and we haven't had the resources to go back in and do that sort of evaluation.
Yeah.
I'm also smiling because that bench at one point didn't look as though it was going to be erected at all.
That bench, there's a big backstory to that.
There's a backstory to that because there was concern, and there's learning from so much. You've just skimmed the surface really of this, but because there was concern it would become a focus for antisocial behaviour, would you believe, from some people, which hasn't materialised. But we had to move its location, didn't we?
Yes. One resident felt very strongly about it,
and all sorts, just to get a bench. Those of you with council experience would completely understand that story, I'm sure. But anyway, Ginny.
I'm just wondering, obviously I do every year have my councillor grants, and depending, they're sort of tightening up some of the criteria around it, so it kind of depends on whether I've got that flexibility. But I'm just wondering whether a councillor grant could be put towards maybe some more walks and so on for you to do that, whether you're still going to be able to do that sort of thing, Scott?
Yeah, definitely. That would be that would be great. I think the walks are really one of the most powerful things that I've done. And there's still a lot. And interestingly, the walks are so have such a draw that one of the walks I did for the South Downs National Park Gateway project was actually at Heath Pond. So that was one of the only walks where people actually had to drive to get to, because there's no other way. And I think 8 or 9 people came out for that one, and I was really surprised because it was a bit of I went out on a limb there. So yeah, I would definitely love to continue offering the walks, and I think that would be
You'd be up for giving you a grant for that if you're able to.
Yeah.
Won't know until next April, but we'll have to have a chat about it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But that's brilliant. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Any other comments or questions, James?
Well, I just wanted to say that for me, the priority should be to create a climate of opinion amongst the general population that enables politicians to take effective, massive actions with the necessary urgency. And I think that's one of the things which was so important about this particular project, that it was, instead of climate change being a concern of a few environmentalists and quotes, it was a problem for us all, with something that everybody's got to be involved in and share. To be quite honest, there's been some backsliding recently, particularly, of course, in America, but Reform are basically climate change deniers and hugely running very high in the polls at the moment. My priority is to somehow try and confront the deniers and try and make people realize that this is a problem for everybody, and the ultimate solutions are going to be political, and we must support the politicians in doing things which are difficult to do. So that's just
and interestingly, in all of the surveys that we did, we had this very carefully worded question. Not question. Actually, it was a very carefully worded sentence where people had to say if they disagree or if they agree, and it said radical actions are needed. So we extra included that word radical because we thought we want to make sure that people realize that this is and we actually expected a lot of people to cross disagree, because we thought that word radical would kind of scare them. But there was a massive, I think over 90% of people agreed with that radical actions are needed. And this is no matter if it was White Down Ward or ACAN Hill, was the same. And these are all people who have comfortable lives. They can afford a house in Alton. These are not people who have nothing to lose. And still they agreed that radical actions are needed. And they also all agreed that politicians aren't doing enough. So that kind of meant, and they all themselves weren't doing very much either. So these radical actions that they believe are needed, it's not like they were doing them. but there was a general agreement that they're needed, and obviously they were looking towards politicians to maybe guide them along. And I think that addresses one, like, a big mistake that a lot of politicians seem to make, is that they think that they can't go for radical changes because then everyone will not vote for them anymore. But there are actually a lot of people who say we actually need radical changes. So it's interesting that, James, your point with, like, how can we translate that into political action? How can we show politicians that people are actually ready for big changes? It's definitely going to be the challenge of the next decade, I think, where we need to make these changes on the political level, and we need to embolden, really, the politicians to say, if you look at France, like, what they partly do, but just the kind of things that they just say, like, right, this is the law now. This is like, we're not going to have short distance flights anymore, and all these kind of things. Like, it's possible. But yeah, that's I totally agree. That has to be a focus.
Jenny?
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you said, but it is really difficult to embolden change. I mean, I'm bringing my rivers motion tomorrow at East Hants District Council, which I hope will be a catalyst to how we care for our rivers and chalk streams within East Hampshire. But these things, they are difficult because in order for that to go through, you have to work for political consensus, and it's been like pulling teeth, quite frankly, to get something that I feel is worth doing and worth putting forward. But unfortunately, we're not all batting on the same side yet. And it's crazy because it shouldn't be about politics. Yeah. It should all be about, climate and environment and doing what's best for the planet. But it is hard. And, until that kind of changes within this country in particular, it does mean that it's really tough going to, it's like pushing water uphill almost, that it just doesn't happen. But we are trying. Some of us are trying.
Yeah, it definitely, yes. And thank you for that.
Well, maybe on that note, unless anyone else has any particular comments, people who haven't spoken want to make any comment. I'll just ask Scott one final question. Looking back on the last 3.5 years, are there any big things you would do differently, do you think?
Any big things I would do differently?
I mean, there'd be lots of small things, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you think overall the mix, because it has been a huge mix of different types of approaches and activities over that period of time, hasn't it?
Yes. I don't really think there would be any one big thing where I would say I would do that completely differently. I think
that's
overall,
a really message in itself.
Yeah, I think overall also that very diverse mix of things, the point that we kind of stayed flexible and adapted. I think overall I would say I'd do it all again.
Right. No, well, that's a hugely important message, I think. And I think the diversity of approaches, perhaps we should pull out actually, is one of the huge successes of it.
I think so too, yeah.
Made it as effective as it has been, So, okay. All right. Well, unless anyone else wants to add any further reflections, it's gone 8:05. Can I thank firstly Scott for a fantastic presentation. And for answering all our questions and comments as well. It's a very life-enhancing project, I think, this one, and community enhancing, and that's what we are. We are Climate Action Network, and as Scott has said, it links with and supports and underpins actually a lot of the work that all the other groups in the network do. So I hope we can keep it going in some shape or form by putting this sort of patchwork quilt of funding together. And thank you for the comments on that, and that we disseminate it. That's a very good point as well.
Very good point.
We'll return to that, Scott. We'll have a discussion about it. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you ever so much. That was a really
thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop recording.